Lieutenant Kira Rodriguez stared out the viewport of Communications Station Delta 7, watching the shimmer of Vexarian warships in the distance. Their crystalline hulls caught the light of the nearby star, creating rainbow patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't attached to vessels intent on destroying humanity's furthest outpost. Day 147 of the siege. She muttered into her personal log, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to die of boredom before the Vexarians even fire a shot. The isolation station had been designed to withstand years of siege, equipped with everything from hydroponics to entertainment systems. What its designers hadn't accounted for was how mind-numbingly dull it would be to maintain radio silence for months on end, while an alien fleet simply waited. The Vexarians were known for their patience. Their society operated on precise mathematical principles, each action calculated to maximize efficiency. They had probably computed that waiting out the station's supplies would be more resource-effective than launching an assault against its formidable defenses. What they hadn't factored into their calculations was human unpredictability. Specifically, what happens when you leave a sleep-deprived communications officer alone with a malfunctioning coffee maker. "Come on, you piece of..." Kira smacked the side of the machine, which had been making suspicious gurgling noises for the past week. The station's AI had warned her that the water recycling system needed maintenance, but she'd been putting it off. After all, how complicated could a coffee maker be? The answer, as it turned out, was very complicated when connected to a station-wide water purification system that also happened to interface with the communications array for temperature regulation. As Kira hit the brew button one more time, the machine made a sound that coffee makers definitely shouldn't make, something between a whale song and a dying computer. The lights in the communications bay flickered, and suddenly every screen lit up with cascading data. Oh no. No. Kira's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to stop whatever was happening. The coffee maker, in its death throes, had somehow managed to send a power surge through the station's systems. This wouldn't have been a problem if Kira hadn't modified the machine to brew proper coffee instead of the standard military instant stuff. Her unauthorized modifications had created a connection between the machine's temperature sensors and the station's main communication array. As the coffee maker overloaded, it began broadcasting on all frequencies, not words or data, but the electronic equivalent of a caffeine-fueled scream. In the Vexarian fleet, First Strategist Zix 427 was jolted from their meditation cycle by an alarm. Their sensor arrays had detected an unusual transmission from the human station, a signal that defied all known communication protocols. Analysis. They commanded their subordinates. The bridge of the Vexarian flagship came alive with activity as they attempted to decode what they assumed must be a new human weapon. The signal's pattern was chaos itself, rising and falling in seemingly random intervals, carrying what appeared to be thermal readings, but modulated in ways that made no logical sense. To the pattern-obsessed Vexarians, it was either complete nonsense or the most sophisticated code they had ever encountered. First Strategist, one of the analysts reported, their crystalline features reflecting confusion. The signal appears to be modulated through their thermal regulation systems. It seems to be affecting our ship's temperature sensors. Indeed, the erratic signal had caused the Vexarian ship's environmental systems to respond sympathetically, creating a wave of temperature fluctuations throughout the fleet. To a species that prided itself on maintaining perfect homeostasis, this was deeply disturbing. Back on the station, Kira had finally managed to disconnect the coffee maker, but not before it had sprayed hot coffee across half the communications bay. As she mopped up the mess, she remained blissfully unaware that she had just committed what the Vexarians would interpret as an act of sophisticated psychological warfare. First Strategist Zix 427 watched as their fleet systems slowly returned to normal. They had faced human military tactics before, but this was different. What kind of species would weaponize thermal regulation patterns? What message were they trying to send? Log this incident, they commanded. Classification: highest priority. Begin analysis of all similar frequency patterns in human communications. There must be a pattern we are missing. As the Vexarian fleet shifted into a defensive formation, preparing for what they assumed would be the first of many psychological attacks, Kira finally got the backup coffee maker working. Note to self, she yawned, taking her first sip of properly brewed coffee in weeks. Maybe stick to the instant stuff next time. The screens in the communication bay had returned to their normal status displays, showing the Vexarian fleet in its new peculiar formation. Kira squinted at the tactical display. Huh, she mused. Wonder what got them all worked up. Little did she know, she had just initiated what would become known in Vexarian military history as the Great Thermal Offensive, all because she couldn't stand another day of instant coffee. The artificial gravity seemed to hiccup, and Kira watched her coffee mug float briefly before gravity reasserted itself. She sighed. It was going to be one of those days. In the silence of space, the Vexarian fleet continued its new pattern of movement, their ships arranging and rearranging themselves in response to thermal readings that weren't there. And somewhere in the vast database of their flagship, a new tactical doctrine was being written, all based on the death throes of a modified coffee maker. The siege of Station Delta 7 had just entered a new phase, and nobody, human or Vexarian, had the slightest idea what was really going on. 3 days after the coffee maker incident, Lieutenant Kira Rodriguez had forgotten all about the malfunctioning machine. She had bigger problems, namely, the fact that she had just run out of episodes of Stellar Hearts, her favorite soap opera. The isolation station's entertainment database was extensive, but after 147 days, she had watched everything worth watching. Twice. The only thing she hadn't touched was Commander Jensen's personal collection of historical documentaries about 21st century tax legislation. There has to be something, she muttered, scrolling through the database for the 100th time. The communications bay hummed quietly around her, its screens showing the same unchanging image of the Vexarian fleet, still arranged in their bizarre new formation. What Kira didn't know was that her coffee maker's death had left some interesting modifications in the station's communication systems. The thermal regulation protocols were now interlinked with the entertainment database in ways that the station's AI was still trying to understand. So when Kira finally gave up and decided to rewatch the season finale of Stellar Hearts, she accidentally did much more than just start a video file. The episode began normally enough. Dr. Valentina Santiago discovered that her long-lost clone was actually her evil twin's daughter from an alternate dimension, while simultaneously dealing with a complicated love triangle involving 2 cyborg astronauts and a sentient nebula. In the Vexarian fleet, First Strategist Zix 427 was reviewing the analysis of the thermal attack when their sensors detected another transmission. First Strategist, their second-in-command, reported, "The humans are broadcasting again. But this is unlike anything we've seen before." On their screens, the Vexarians watched in growing confusion as human figures engaged in what appeared to be extremely emotional conversations. The station's compromised systems were not only broadcasting the video, but also translating it into thermal patterns that the Vexarians could interpret. They're displaying tactical scenarios. One analyst suggested, their crystalline form vibrating with uncertainty. Look at how they simulate emotional responses to various crises. First Strategist Zix 427 studied the transmission intently. In their society, all communication was precise and purposeful. This had to be some kind of training simulation, perhaps demonstrating human decision-making under stress. The primary female appears to be a military instructor. Another analyst noted, referring to Dr. Santiago's dramatic confrontation with her clone niece. She's clearly demonstrating multiple possible responses to infiltration scenarios. The love triangle subplot was interpreted as a complex allegory for interstellar alliance negotiations. The sentient nebula was assumed to be a metaphor for weapons of mass destruction. Meanwhile, back on the station, Kira was completely engrossed in the show's climactic scene. "No, Valentina," She shouted at the screen. "Don't trust Navigator Blake. He's actually a quantum ghost of your future self." The Vexarians, receiving this outburst through their thermal sensors, went into high alert. The instructor is warning about temporal warfare. First strategist Zix 427 declared. Activate the chronometric shields. The entire Vexarian fleet suddenly powered up defensive systems that hadn't been used in centuries, creating a spectacular light show visible from the station's viewport. Kira glanced up from her show just long enough to notice the display. "Huh, pretty lights," she mumbled, reaching for her snacks without taking her eyes off Dr. Santiago's confrontation with her quantum ghost navigator ex-boyfriend. The station's AI tried to warn her about the unusual power fluctuations in the communication system, but Kira had muted its alerts days ago after it wouldn't stop complaining about her coffee maker modifications. In the following hours, as Kira binge-watched 3 more episodes, the Vexarian fleet conducted 16 emergency drills, recalibrated their temporal sensors 14 times, and composed 300 pages of analytical reports about human psychological warfare techniques. First strategist Zix 427 had never encountered such sophisticated military training simulations. The humans were clearly demonstrating their mastery of emotional manipulation as a tactical tool. The fact that they were broadcasting these scenarios openly had to be a show of force. "They want us to know what we're facing," Zix 427 announced to their command staff. "These transmissions are a warning. The humans are capable of weaponizing chaos itself." The Vexarian analysts worked frantically to decode what they believed were layers of military symbolism. They created complex mathematical models to predict what Dr. Santiago's next crisis would reveal about human battle tactics. When the episode ended on a cliffhanger, with Dr. Santiago discovering that the entire space station was actually a dream being had by her evil twin's clone's pet quantum cat, the Vexarian sensors registered silence. "They're waiting for our response," first strategist Zix 427 realized. This was a test. Back on Station Delta 7, Kira stretched and checked the time. Her shift had ended 3 hours ago, but she couldn't bring herself to stop watching. "Just one more episode," she promised herself, reaching for the controls. The station's AI finally managed to display a warning message. "Unauthorized. The BROADCAST is DETCTED." Kira blinked at the message. "What broadcasts?" she asked, just as the next episode began to play. In the Vexarian fleet, first strategist Zix 427 settled in for another session of what they believed was the most complex military intelligence gathering operation in their species' history. They had already assigned 30 analysts to decode the significance of the quantum cat. The siege of Station Delta 7 had entered its 151st day, and humanity's greatest tactical advantage was turning out to be their entertainment programming. Not that anyone had realized it yet. As Dr. Santiago's face appeared on screen again, Kira had no idea she was single-handedly rewriting the Vexarian military's understanding of human warfare. She was just grateful she had found something to watch. On day 155 of the siege, the Vexarian High Command had dispatched their foremost cultural experts to analyze what they now called the Santiago Protocols. First strategist Zix 427's reports about the human psychological warfare techniques had caused quite a stir. Meanwhile, Kira Rodriguez had hit a new low. She had finished all available episodes of Stellar Hearts and was now doing something truly desperate, reorganizing her digital music collection while playing it through the station's speakers. "If I have to be bored, at least I can be organized," she muttered, creating playlists for different moods. The station's compromised systems faithfully transmitted every song's thermal pattern to the watching Vexarian fleet. "The patterns are becoming more complex," reported the Vexarian's chief cultural analyst, their crystalline form vibrating in distress. They appear to be using rhythmic emotional modulation as a form of combat training. First strategist Zix 427 watched as their screens displayed the thermal interpretation of Kira's Ultimate Breakup Songs playlist. Note how they maintain precise emotional control even while simulating extreme distress, they observed. Truly remarkable. When Kira's playlist reached total eclipse of the heart, the Vexarian sensors nearly overloaded from the power of what they interpreted as a simulation of stellar warfare. The situation reached a critical point on day 160, when Kira decided to tackle the one thing she'd been avoiding: exercise. The station's regulations required daily physical training, but she'd been slacking off during the siege. "Okay," she announced to the empty gym, "time to get back in shape." She pulled up her workout playlist, full of upbeat dance music from the 2180s, and began jumping around in what she called exercise, and others might call uncoordinated flailing. The Vexarians, still monitoring every thermal pattern from the station, went into a panic. The rapid changes in temperature readings, combined with Kira's elevated heart rate and the pulsing music, created patterns that their analysts interpreted as battle preparations. They're conducting high-intensity combat drills, First Strategist Zix-427 reported to High Command. The thermal variations suggest they're preparing for a major offensive. The Vexarian fleet responded by conducting their own combat drills, their ships dancing through space in precise formations that happened to sync perfectly with Kira's workout playlist. When she finally collapsed on the gym floor, exhausted after 20 minutes of what she optimistically called cardio, the Vexarians interpreted her thermal signature as a sign of completed battle meditation. Everything came to a head on day 165. Kira, having exhausted every other form of entertainment, made a fateful decision. Karaoke night. The station regulations don't specifically forbid it, she reasoned to herself, setting up the music system. And it's not like anyone can hear me in space. She was wrong on both counts. Not only could the Vexarians hear everything through their thermal sensors, but her first song choice, Bohemian Rhapsody, was about to make history. As Kira belted out, "Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?" The Vexarian sensors exploded with activity. The complex thermal patterns of the song, combined with Kira's enthusiastic but questionable vocals, created what the Vexarians interpreted as the most sophisticated peace offering they had ever encountered. Analysis complete, the chief cultural expert announced to High Command. "The humans are using a ritual combat resolution ceremony. The emotional resonance patterns match our own ancient peace protocols." First Strategist Zix-427 stared at their screens in awe. "They knew," they whispered. "They knew our old ways. This is not just an offering of peace, it's a demonstration of deep cultural understanding." When Kira reached the operatic section, jumping between voices with more enthusiasm than skill, the Vexarians saw it as a masterful representation of internal conflict resolution. By the time she hit the final, "Nothing really matters," the Vexarian High Command had drafted a peace treaty. The siege of Station Delta 7 ended officially at 300 hours, when Kira, hoarse from 2 hours of karaoke, received an incoming transmission. "This is Lieutenant Rodriguez," she croaked, trying to sound professional despite having just finished a passionate rendition of "Don't Stop Believin'." The message was in perfect human standard. "We accept your peace offering and acknowledge your cultural superiority in matters of emotional warfare. The Vexarian Empire hereby proposes an immediate cessation of hostilities." Kira stared at the message for a long moment. What peace offering? But before she could ask for clarification, she received another message, this one from Human High Command, ordering her to play along with whatever she'd done to end the war. Years later, the story of how Lieutenant Kira Rodriguez ended an interstellar war through a combination of broken coffee makers, soap operas, workout sessions, and karaoke became required study at both human and Vexarian military academies. The Vexarians developed an entire school of tactical theory based on analyzing human entertainment broadcasts, while humanity never quite figured out exactly what had happened. As for Kira, She received the Stellar Peace Medal, a promotion to commander, and a permanent ban from modifying any more coffee makers. She also signed a lucrative contract to host a new interspecies cultural exchange program, which mostly consisted of her watching soap operas and doing karaoke, while Vexarian analysts took detailed notes. The station's AI, meanwhile, finally managed to fix the communication system's thermal regulation protocols, but decided not to mention it to anyone. Some things, it calculated, were better left unexplained. And if visitors to Station Delta 7 sometimes heard Commander Rodriguez singing Bohemian Rhapsody, while the Vexarian cultural attaché solemnly documented every note as a lesson in tactical emotional warfare, well, that was just another day in the complex world of interstellar diplomacy.